I'm Cheryl Chumley. This is Bold and Blunt, giving you a Christian conservative view of news, politics, culture, and events. Sam Sorbo, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to see you again.
So you wear a lot of hats, actress, podcast host, author, wife, mom. And really what I wanted to talk to you about today was your role as homeschooling advocate and education specialist, because you tell me that school boards under this administration are still going after parents and stripping them of their parental rights. And this is a little bit surprising to me. So tell me what you're finding.
Yeah, so what we found is that despite the executive orders, and maybe almost because of them, they've in a sense provoked school boards to double down on their misdealings with the parents with whom they disagree. And so what we're talking about is parents who have spoken to their school boards and said things like, "I don't want my daughter to have a sexual survey placed in front of her. She's a minor, and there's no reason for a third party to conduct a sex survey on minors in the public schools." And the school board has then targeted that parent. They've sent their lawyers after that parent. And by the way, the parent actually reported it to the authorities, and the authorities failed to do what they were mandated by law to do, which would have been to report it further up the chain. So in one regard, you might consider, well, what does the DOJ have to do with this? But what I need to do is connect some dots for you. So back about 4 years ago in October, Merrick Garland sent a memo in which he characterized the parents who were speaking at school board meetings and disagreeing with the school boards as being basically the equivalent of domestic terrorists.
Mm.
And he enlisted the help of the FBI to investigate and go after some of these parents. In a later filing in a later point, he mentioned that they were only targeting the parents who were violent. He used the words violence. And Jim Jordan in Congress did a whole investigation on those violent parents who didn't exist. And so what we're left with is they targeted nonviolent parents for exercising their freedom of speech. And they used the FBI, and the FBI used local law enforcement. So many of these cases are strictly local, but the problem is it began at the federal level. So we're asking the federal government to investigate and pursue some of these cases. And many of them now actually rise to the level of the federal because the egregious nature of the attacks by the school boards as retaliation against some of these parents who spoke at school board meetings and the like. And so, we're in a bit of a morass now because we have the weaponization working group. We've spoken with them. I represent an organization called Parents Demanding Justice Alliance. It's a group of these parents who have been targeted. Some of them have lost their livelihoods. They've been tarnished. Their reputations have been tarnished. Their businesses have been attacked simply for speaking their mind. Speaking their minds at a school board meeting, and this administration has failed to act. And so we're getting very frustrated because while the administration is failing to act, it is also saying we've taken care of all of this. We issued an executive order, and that's it. That does it. But it doesn't do it. In fact, it goads them into doubling down. And we're seeing this with the DEI as well. So there was an executive order against DEI in the classroom, against CRT in the classroom. But you're seeing videos online. Of course, this is all sort of anecdotal, but there are many of them where you see the zealots saying, "I don't care if they tell me I can't teach this. I'm going to talk about my gay marriage in the classroom, or I'm going to talk about whatever. I'm going to talk about critical race theory in the classroom." And so it's almost like they're shoving their middle finger at this administration by doing exactly what the administration has said we will no longer be doing. And so you have Pam Bondi, who's the head of the DOJ, testifying before Congress, this is not happening any longer. And likely she doesn't know that that's actually a lie for her, sadly. It's possible that she doesn't know that she's lying to the American public, but it is her job to know whether it's happening or not. And it is happening, and they are now aware. The DOJ is aware. Whether they've not told her, I can't comment on. But they can't send her out to testify to the American people that something is not happening when the DOJ itself knows that it is. So we have actions in front of the DOJ. We have a lot of paperwork in front of the DOJ right now, and we are waiting for them to act. And they need to act because they are called to act. The government actually targeted its own citizens here within the United States, and it needs to make that right now.
So, Sam, I want to go back to one of the very first things you said, an example of what's going on in our public school systems, because I think even now, with parents being awakened under COVID to the atrocities their kids are being fed in public schools, I don't think that they realize how deep it goes. You said that children were subjected to mandated sex surveys in the classroom. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about what that means. I don't even think most parents know that that's allowable in some school systems, and if there are any other examples you found that are just as egregious as that.
So, let's talk about allowable, that word, right? So, I don't know that there are states that have enacted laws against doing sex surveys on children. So allowable, what's here's the problem. It's a third party for this one individual, this one case out of Pennsylvania. It's a third party that did it. And so he protested. He said, I do not want this to happen to my child in school, or it was multiple children actually. And it's none of their business. And the school said, sit down, shut up. And by the way, your job is now at risk because we're going to go talk to your employer. But we have another case out of this state of, it's close to it's out of Tucson, I think, in Arizona, of a school teacher herself, a school teacher who became a substitute teacher. She taught in the, oh shoot. She taught for, learning disabled children for 14 years. But then she also became a substitute teacher, and she substituted for a teacher who had set up mirrors in his classroom to look up little girls' skirts. This was the teacher. And so she brought it to the attention of the school board because it's a liability when you have a pervert teacher who is, enacting his own perversions on the children. And by the way, like there was a law in the classroom, there was a rule that you could not approach his desk from the two center aisles because then you would see what the mirrors were seeing, but you could only approach from the outside aisles. I mean, this is like well thought out. So she brought it to the school and said, this is a liability. And it's been going on for 3 years, by the way. And no one apparently knew about it. Apparently, I say apparently because it's cost her almost $500,000 in legal fees to defend herself against the school board that sided with the perverted teacher. So we're not talking about one time a teacher asked a child a question or what have you. We're talking about behavior that is now systemic because it has been approved. And the further behavior that I'm waging my war against is the retaliation against parents who are trying to protect their children. We need parents to protect their children. Children need their parents to protect them because there are a lot of predators out there. And if you were a predator who wanted to go after children, where would you go? But the place that children congregate. And then you would disarm anybody who was trying to protect the parents. And that is the stage that we are in with our nation's schools, particularly the government-run schools, particularly those,
So
particularly the union-run schools.
I know from speaking with you over the years that your big advocacy is homeschooling and that the public school system in America is completely irredeemable. You can't repair it. Under this administration, there has been talk about abolishing the Federal Department of Education. Of course, that action hasn't been taken yet. But if that were to happen, do you see the public schools in America returning to states' rights, returning to localities, and becoming something that children could safely attend? Or do you still say, no matter what, homeschooling is the answer?
That is such a trick question, Cheryl.
Is
I'm
it?
kidding.
Oh,
No, no. Okay. So
I
so
didn't
y
mean
the
it that
premise
way.
the premise of your question is that somehow the schools are broken. They're not broken. That's where we kind of lose the thread. The schools are enacted to create individuals who cannot think for themselves, who toe the line, who don't disrupt, who follow directions, who pay their taxes, okay, who go to a job and don't complain, who move at the sound of a bell, and or who go to prison. That, unfortunately, is the design behind our nation's schools. So to fix them would be to break that. That's the problem that we face. Now, then we pivoted into the Department of Education, which they're shutting down. They're not actually, so the Department of Education itself employs now about 4,500 people. They're going to close that down. So those 4,500 people will be ostensibly out of a job, except that what they're doing is they're dividing what the Department of Education actually takes care of, which is not education at all. It's funding programs for SEL learner, not SEL, but disabled learners or whatever. It's school lunch programs and it's college loans, which it should never have been college loans. That should be privatized. But I don't even think they're planning to privatize the college loans. I think they're basically just dividing the Department of Education and then moving it around into other area, putting it in other departments. And so those departments will then have to hire people. Who are they going to hire? Maybe the people that came from the Department of Education who just lost their jobs. Like, I'm not sure. Like, it sounds really good on its face, but like it's kind of a wait and see. I don't see the government purposely making itself smaller. I know that the effort is there. I don't know if the will is there. And the biggest problem that we have, and this is a very contentious issue, but because the Department of Education is very much in favor of what they're calling school choice. Now, to define school choice, we really ought to be using the words taxpayer funded schooling that is privatized, basically. So the parents get to decide where the taxpayers' money goes. But if the individual is deciding where that taxpayer money is going, there's got to be some accountability for that. And that will be government run. Therefore, it's the government ultimately making the decision whether the parent can spend that taxpayer money on what the parent wants to do to educate the child, which basically makes every private school where that money goes a government school. And so, unfortunately, the government funded school choice will kill independent education because everything will become government school.
I
It
see
can,
yeah, I see your logic here with that, and, I think parents in America have just become so ingrained, uh,
yes.
in believing
We've been
that
sold a lie, and we have not been taught by our own schooling to exercise discernment and ask the important questions of what exactly are we talking about? So school choice sounds awesome. Everybody wants choice. You have it already. It exists. You can choose any school to send your child. You might have to pay. That's how the world works, right? Oh no, the government's going to give you money to pay. Guess what happens to tuition when the government gives you money to pay? All the tuition rises because there's more money in the marketplace. Like, and so if we don't think it all the way through, it sounds really good. School choice, the money follows the child. All of those little taglines that they've come up with sounds great. Unfortunately, in practice, it will kill actual truthful education, which happens in the home. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at Sweden. They enacted full on school choice. And 10 years later, they had outlawed home education because school cannot compete with home education. This is why I'm such a proponent of home education. If you want your child to be clever, to be smart and educated, instead of schooled to follow directions, then you keep them home. And school will never be able to compete with home education. And you can look at, I've been saying this for years now because it's been true for years, but the institutions of higher learning in our country are actively recruiting homeschoolers because they're the ones that think outside the box.
Mhm.
Whereas now we have a crisis in our higher education institutions of young people who are students who cannot solve problems because they're used to being given basically multiple choice of what is the solution to the problem. And so they can't think outside the box to solve a problem. And Cheryl, we are going to be facing some very big problems. We need to have problem solvers. The only answer is home education, sadly. I mean, I wish it could be some other thing. There are actually some other types of schools that have been now that have been enacted that are practicing more of a home education sort of a platform in an institutional setting. And so there's hope on the horizon for institutionalized learning, but I don't believe children belong in institutions. And so if you come at it with the mindset that every child should just go away from their parents and be institutionalized, we're going to have an impasse. I don't believe in that. I think children love their parents and they should be around their parents and the parents love their children, and that it is unnatural for us to unnaturally separate the children from their parents at such a young age for so many hours a day.
Let's just finish with this last question. Holding the Justice Department accountable to what's actually happening on the ground level in schools. What quickly, Sam? What could parents do right now if
I
they're
got a
listening?
really easy solution for you. You can sign our petition. It's a letter actually, and we're looking for signatories. So go to samsorbo.com. That's just my name, samsorbo.com. The banner right at the top of the website, click on it and you can sign the letter. You can read the letter and sign it. Of course, you want to read it because you just don't sign blindly like you're taught to do in school. Uh, but read the letter because we need to have a show of support. We need the government to understand that it starts with the parents. If you want to save this nation's children, which means the nation's future, you're going to have to start with the parents. And right now, there's a war going. It's raging in our schools against parents who seek to protect their children. And what is happening to our children in schools with the transgender agenda, the woke agenda, the CRT, the DEI, it goes on and on. All of that is an attack on truth and an attack on our children. And we have to stand in the breach and stop it. And so we need to support the parents who are willing to go to the mat. Many of them unknowingly, right? They just spoke their mind at the school board. Hey, I think this is wrong what you're doing. And boom, they were taken out. They were just taken out by these vindictive school board people. I mean, I have one story. It's a silly story, but the father spoke at the school board meeting, disagreeing with one of the policies. And the next thing he knows, he's forbidden from entering school property. He can't pick up his child at school because he gets arrested for trespassing because a school board member decided. They just in their little tyrannical way, they just decided, I don't like what you said. You're not allowed anymore. That's outrageous.
Wow.
There's a mother who went to pick up her child from school, needed to pick him up early for a doctor's appointment. They refused. No, you may not have your child. What? Yes, that is where we are now. I really urge parents, do not send your children to strangers under any conditions. Do not. You haven't had lunch with that teacher, much less, know their first name barely, right? And
Oh,
you're giving your child to a perfect stranger for the entire day. It's dangerous.
the
It's become
petition
very dangerous.
is at samsorbo.com. That's what you said, the
Yes.
petition? All right, couldn't be
Yes.
simpler.
And
Sam,
by the way, if you scroll down, you can read more about Parents Demanding Justice Alliance. We are accepting donations. It is not easy work doing this and traveling to DC and helping these parents get their voices heard. So we do appreciate donations also. Just go to samsorbo.com. All the information is there. If you are considering taking your child out of school, all the information is there. I'm here to support you in that decision.
couldn't be easier. Thank you so much, Sam. Sam Sorbo, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blonde. Thank you for your fight for child's education and critical thinking in this country. Much, much needed. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.